I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending October the 4th and 5th, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute, but brought to you by the International Brangus Breeders Association. Brangus, nothing fake here, just real ranchers producing top quality beef. To find a breeder or a production sale near you, visit gobrangus.com. Had Saturday trade. We don't have that very often, fat cattle trade in your negotiated 5 areas, and that would have been almost unheard of. Once in a while you hear of a deal of it, but probably the most significant Saturday trade I ever really remember of. But your packers got fairly aggressive late in the week, and so that's a good thing. We see this market coming around, and it seemed like before maybe a few weeks ago, maybe just a couple of weeks ago, that we were getting so many of these market-ready cattle in the southern plains that it was going to be hard to gain anything there. I think maybe instead, and I'm not saying we won't hit a speed bump here, but we're probably just going to see a bigger spread as we work for your northern cattle. Your northern plains cattle probably going to increase their premium just a little bit because not a lot of market-ready cattle up there. So they're either going to pay freight or they'll give them a little bit more money up there. And then they've got the quality they're after too, and so they'll probably just go ahead and give the premium there. But we're starting to see good prices for cattle outside the 5 area region, along the fringes there. I told you about my buddy Jim Felton's cattle, good demand for them in Montana. There was another set of cattle that sold at the extreme top of the market as far as negotiated trade in Indiana. Just places like that where you've got smaller independent lots that are feeding for high quality, and they're really looking for that right now. At the same time, we're hearing that they're starting to complain about big carcasses in Kansas. They can't have it both ways. If they want to keep feeding those cattle in Kansas, and they're not necessarily the cattle that are going to grade quite so easy, but if they want them to inefficiently keep feeding those cattle, they're going to get bigger carcasses on them. But you look at this, the grading percentage. You know, here we look a few months back, and then we saw these huge grading percentages of choice and better, and you know, all over 80% choice and higher. But now we're starting to get back into the realm of reality and normal type grading scenarios there. I think it has a lot to do with the camera grading that is now prevalent in all your major packing plants. They've actually got a camera that takes an image of the ribeye. It looks in there and looks at the amount of marbling, gives it a marbling score, and that's how your quality grade is mostly done there. A lot of your yield grading is in-house nowadays, so that's not quite as important to them, but they will still penalize you for yield grade 4s and 5s. But we do have graders on staff there while it's going on, but they're basically just overseeing the camera. But they are keeping a closer eye on that camera and keeping it from getting quite so out of whack. They can pull that camera nowadays and do a correlation with it and make sure that it's looking at them the way it's supposed to be looking at them. But your most recent, which was a week ago, Nebraska choice and prime percentage was still over 80%, 80.77%. Kansas down to 75.42% choice and prime, and Texas sitting at 63.68, which is about normal for Texas if you look over history, and Nebraska too. Kansas might actually be a little bit high, but they've been feeding the heck out of those cattle. They're getting bigger, and they're wanting them to grade because they found out when they had so much of that higher quality product that it was a pretty good sell. Imagine that. But let's look at some of your futures markets for last week. Live cattle futures for October. Monday was down 45 cents. Tuesday was up a nickel. Wednesday up 142. Thursday up 75 cents, and Friday up 55 cents. To end the week with October at 107.35, up $2.33 for the week. You look at December, it settled at 110.77, up just 20 cents for the week. So we saw big gains on your spot live cattle contract. Feeder cattle are actually going in the other direction about the same amount on your spot contract there. The main reason for that, we had that bullish grain stocks report for the grain, bullish for the grain, not for the feeder cattle, but we saw a pretty good spike in some of your grains there early this past week because of those grain stocks reports there and lighter numbers around. We're still expecting a pretty good crop out there. They're getting into the heat of it right now, but it's been so damp around that you don't want to stick a combine. So they've been having to wait for that. They still think that it's probably going to dry down to where they can get along pretty good once the fields kind of get dry and the sun comes out for a little bit. But just been wet all over the country, especially up through the central parts. But feeder cattle, Monday down $1.92. That was a big jolt right there. Tuesday down $1.42. It's amazing your feeder cattle sales were so good, the way the board on the feeder cattle was down so hard. Wednesday back up $1.10. Thursday up 27 cents, and Friday it was off 37 cents, with October feeder cattle ending the week at 141.97. That was down 2.35 for the week. November was down $1.60 at 141.37. Let's talk about your fat cattle. If you've seen one of my talks recently, and the talk that I gave at the rally in Omaha was online. If you guys didn't see it, it was on one place you could have found it on Facebook was Tri-State Livestock News. That's a publication up there, and they had it listed on there. Some other places you could have seen it, but had one slide on there talking about the Cowboys and the Packers. Well, the Packers kind of prevailed on Sunday afternoon, if you guys watched that too. Cowboys looked like they didn't even belong on the field with them, but actually, the Cowboys probably won last week's competition on the trade, because we just saw the bids get higher and higher and higher as we worked through the week. Through Thursday, negotiated fat cattle sales in your 5-area feeding region, only 6,900 head, which goes to tell you the feedlots were dug in pretty deep. And but we saw just a little smattering of trade through Thursday, mostly 105 to 106, and mostly in the northern plains. Some dress sales from 163 to 167. Friday we had the bulk of the trade. Your southern plains feedlots in Kansas and Texas and Oklahoma Panhandle, eastern New Mexico, all sold at 107. That would be $4 higher for the week. Don't see that kind of gain in your negotiated fat cattle trade very much, but $4 higher at 107, predominantly in the southern plains. Nebraska there in near the river there, they sold mostly 170 dressed. That was $5 higher dressed, so good trade there. We saw a little bit of a trade on in Iowa and Nebraska on a live basis from 107 to 109, so right in there, but not much live sales because we were still kind of cleaning up eastern Nebraska and Iowa. You don't see a whole lot of live stuff in there, but mostly 170 dressed. But on Saturday morning, we thought we were pretty much done, but sometimes we forget about that 3% area out there in western Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming there. They have several feedlots right there in that southeast corner of Wyoming. But they sold at 109 on Saturday morning. So that's amazing that they were able to gain that much ground there. That was quite a bit higher for them, $2 to $3 higher. And we also heard there was some 109 trade in Kansas, within the borders of Kansas, probably in that little area which I consider your northern plains, but still in Kansas, but north of I-70 right in there. But that's a good market, and it was almost, you could almost call it some competition in there as they were bidding for cattle and wanting some of those better quality cattle, and really a nice trade as far as trying to gain some ground, getting some leverage back. I've told you guys that I think we've got some tough terrain here as we work through October. There's going to be a week or so in here that we're going to have way too many balling calves, and it's going to hurt the market on everything. Your fat cattle trade is probably going to have a week or two in there that they're going to think there's way too many market-ready cattle, especially in the southern plains. But I think as we get into the new year and early next year, we're going to have an opportunity to make a lot of stride in a hurry. But we've got to be able to get a little bit of that leverage back to take advantage of it, or there's really no use in having it. But box beef cutout values, we're down again, and I tell you what, the packers really getting squeezed on both ends, having to give more for cattle and take less for their box beef products. But luckily they had a big margin in there to whittle at on both ends, and they're probably going to be all right. But choice boxes, choice cuts, your average trade for the week last week was $212.58. That was down $1.93 compared to the weighted average from the previous week. Selects $186.64, down $3.48 for the week, and a good movement, almost 700 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. So good movement on that, and it's all about the volume when you're talking about that box beef cutout values. Your slaughter eased off a little bit last week, 639,000 for the week, which was down 9,000 from the previous week. Just 1,000 off last year though, but only 64,000 on Saturday, and we've been doing a lot better than that since the fire in Holcomb, Kansas. But let's talk about your feeder markets. I'm going to give you a lot of feeder quotes here. And I want to talk about your RTI, your real-time index on Cattle Market Central. Late in the week, ending the week at 144.22. That was up $2.11. So we gained ground there. Your cash feeders last week in your sales were $1 to $3 higher, which goes right along with that RTI. Your calves were unevenly steady. Joplin Regional Stockyards here on Monday. Be sure and you can check those out on the National Beef Wire on channel 6000, but kind of a late start for them, 8 o'clock in the morning. That, you know, they never drag their feet that late unless they've got a fairly light run. But 4,000 head expected, which would be fairly light for them, but gonna let the guys really sleep in and not get started till 8 o'clock in the morning. They'll still get done early in the afternoon there because they pump them right through. But expecting that to be the early Monday sales, your high volume sales should be good, especially with word of this fat cattle market out there. And the word might not really be out until you get your feeder flash, but pretty good deal. Let's talk about some markets that are not really readily available. But I said your calves were unevenly steady last week. I talked to Ellison Carter with Ellison Carter Cattle Company. I know it's wet up here in the hard red winter wheat region. You guys have gotten a lot of moisture. This wheat is going to be rank. We just hope we don't get a whole lot more of that really hot weather with the wind. But it's really turned off seasonal right here, but there's going to be plenty of moisture to have a lot of wheat. Going to be plenty of it to graze, so we need to get some of these calves brought in to graze this wheat. And Ellison Carter is a shipper out of Central Texas there, just west of Fort Worth at Santo, Texas, not San Antonio, way further north than that. But a lot of those guys, they order cattle, put together cattle like that from those shippers, and that's the kind of cattle they run on the wheat pasture. But it's hard to get a market on those cattle because a lot of them come out of those small sale barns, Central Texas, working back east towards Louisiana and in the southeast there. But Ellison's a shipper that I know there that he gives me some good information. He said the markets had been creeping up a little bit here in the last few weeks, but had eased off on Friday and Saturday of this last week, mostly due to the weather. Because I tell you what, big rains, and you don't want to be shipping newly purchased cattle when it's really wet and cool, and more than that, just a temperature change right there. And some of your growing yards in your background and lots in the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma areas where they have a lot of that wheat pasture, they don't really want them when it gets wet and boggy like that, so they kind of shut the guys down a little bit. But he gave me some quotes on some cattle that he shipped this week. Usually ship on the weekends on Sunday there, or late in the week if they get them put together that quick. But some kind of fancy little pee-wee steers and bulls, blacks and charolais, the kinds a lot of guys want, but some little loads of them, one averaging 314 pounds at 164, kind of sound worth the money. 380 pounders at 154. you're stepping back in quality just a little bit. Some kind of number one Okies, and everybody wants to know, what's a number one Okie? Number one Okies are put together cattle, predominantly English. They're going to be colored up quite a bit, but just a straight number one Okies won't have hardly any ear at all evident anywhere, but colored up a little bit, but predominantly English. But on the number one Okie steers and bulls, load weighing 479 pounds on the average at 143, stepping up in weight a little bit, 547 pounds. These are delivered prices to the wheat country. 547 pounders at 136, 621 pounders at $130, similar type heifers 302 pounds, 141, and load averaging 442 pounds at 124. Let's back up a little bit more. Some 1.5s, if you guys know what that is. 1.5 Okies, including crossbred. So this is kind of your typical type of Southern Plains wheat cattle right here. Some steers and bulls averaging 404 at 149, and on the heifers 355 pounds at 136. If you can get by with some plain cattle, they're going to be some twos on them, but still have some stretch and some frame. Just lighter muscle type cattle. Load of steers and bulls weighing 493 at 119, and some heifers averaging 541 at 107. So they got 4 legs and a tail. And there's value and everything, guys, but you hear some cattle in there that you're interested in, you can get a hold of Ellison Carter. His contact information is at ellisoncartercattle.com. But let's talk about some individual quotes from your sales. Last week I told you your feeders were $1 to $3 higher in your sales, calves unevenly steady. Crawford, Nebraska, 600 to 700 pound steers. Look at these loads of 600 to 750 pound steers and some bigger strings in there, all in the 160s. Those would be calves, top quality calves, some kind of reputation type deals starting to come to town there. But included in there is this one string, 167 head of 612 pound steer calves in Crawford, Nebraska, bring 167.75. Burwell, Nebraska, some light calves there. 75 head on Friday, weighed 492 at $178. Bloomington, Wisconsin, 60 head on Friday, weighed 883 at $150.75. Wow, that's getting pretty close to 900 pounds and a good $6 over what index is running right now. At good cattle up there in Bloomington, Wisconsin. Let's talk about a sale that I never talked about before. Stockland Livestock Auction, Spokane, Washington. They had their annual carload feeder special there, included in there in Spokane, way up there in the northwest. 89 head of 643 pound steers bring 152. I tell you what, I can't thank you guys enough for the outpouring of support that you gave me since the big rally up in Omaha, that kind of a failed rally there. But I want to thank you guys for all the support you've given me. I've gotten tons of phone calls, texts, emails, Facebook messengers, just everything. And if I didn't get back to you, I'm sorry. I actually just got swamped with them. But I tell you what, all you guys that listen to this report, the Feeder Flash gang, I call you, I thank you to the bottom of my heart. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing right here, and you guys keep tuning in. But that's a look at your markets for the week from a home DV auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.